Imagine a room where every wall is a mirror. Everywhere you look you see only yourself. Every voice you hear is an echo of your own desires. Every hand that reaches out is merely an extension of your will. This is not a metaphor for narcissism. It is a precise architectural blueprint of absolute power. Most of us believe we desire freedom. We think that if no one ever told us no, then we would finally be happy. We imagine that a life without boundaries is the ultimate paradise. But the human mind was not designed for the vacuum of space. It requires friction. It requires the resistance of reality to define its shape. When you remove the word no from your environment, you do not become free. You become untethered. You begin to drift into a darkness so profound that the only way to feel alive is to inflict pain on others, to scream into the void and demand that the void screams back. This is the story of a young man who was given the world before he was old enough to understand it. It is an autopsy of the human soul when it is stripped of consequences. We look back at history and call him a monster, but perhaps he was simply a man who was allowed to be fully and terribly human. Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus was born into the shadow of giants. His father was the beloved General Germanicus, and his great-uncle was the Emperor Tiberius. The soldiers loved him as a toddler. They made him tiny boots and called him Caligula or Little Boots. It was a cute nickname for a child who would grow up to walk in rivers of blood. But the adorable mascot did not last long. His father died under suspicious circumstances. His mother and brothers were exiled and starved to death by the paranoia of the emperor. The young Gaius was summoned to the island of Capri to live with the very man who had destroyed his family. Capri was not a home. It was a gilded cage built on terror. Tiberius was an old bitter man who spent his final years indulging in depravity and executing anyone who looked at him wrong. For the teenage Caligula, life became a performance of survival. He learned to hide his rage behind a mask of perfect obedience. He watched the torture of his friends and family without blinking. He praised the man who murdered his mother. He learned that truth is a liability, and that survival depends on becoming exactly what the predator wants you to be. Historians would later say that he was a viper, nursing at the breast of a viper. This was the crucible. The young man learned that power is not about justice or law. Power is about the ability to hurt others without being hurt in return. He learned that the only way to be safe is to be the one holding the knife. And he learned that in the game of empire, there are no rules, only winners and corpses. In the year 37, the old monster Tiberius finally died. Some say Caligula suffocated him with a pillow just to be sure. The empire let out a collective sigh of relief. The dark days were over. The son of the beloved Germanicus was now emperor. He was young. He was handsome. He was the hope of Rome. For the first few months it seemed like a golden age had dawned. Caligula recalled exiles and burned the records of treason trials. He threw lavish games and gave bonuses to the military. The people of Rome were ecstatic. They saw a savior. They did not see the cracks forming in the porcelain. The human brain relies on feedback loops. When we make a mistake, the world corrects us. When we cross a line, social pressure pushes us back. But Caligula had ascended to a position where correction was treason. He was surrounded by senators who were terrified of him and advisors who only wanted to please him. Then came the illness. 7 months into his reign, Caligula fell violently ill with a brain fever. The entire empire prayed for his recovery. Men offered their own lives to the gods in exchange for his. When he woke up, he was different. The mask he had worn on Capri had fused with his face. He looked around at the sycophants and the flatterers, and he realized something terrifying. They were not people. They were props. They had offered to die for him. So he decided to take them up on their offer. He forced the men who had prayed for his life to commit suicide. It was a test of reality. He was checking to see if the laws of cause and effect still applied to him. They did not. He demanded death, and death happened. He demanded gold, and gold appeared. The boundary between his imagination and objective reality began to dissolve. The nightmare had begun. History remembers the horse. We are told that Caligula planned to make his favorite horse Incititus a consul of Rome. For centuries, this has been cited as the ultimate proof of his madness. A lunatic who could not distinguish between a beast and a senator. But look closer. This was not madness. This was political theater of the highest order. Caligula hated the Senate. He viewed them as weak, pathetic old men who would bow to anything he said. By suggesting his horse be made consul, he was not elevating the horse. He was destroying the Senate. He was saying that a dumb animal could do their job just as well as they could. He was showing them that their titles and their dignity existed only because he allowed it. It was a joke, a dark, terrifying joke. And the punchline was that the senators had to nod and agree. They had to treat the horse with respect, because to insult the horse was to insult the emperor. This is the psychology of total domination. It is not enough to force men to obey reasonable commands. True power is forcing men to debase themselves by obeying the absurd. When you force a man to agree with a lie, you own his mind. Caligula was breaking their spirits one absurdity at a time. He gave the horse a marble stall and servants. He invited dignitaries to dine with the beast. He watched them smile and eat and degrade themselves. And he laughed. The erosion of reality continued. If he could command the Senate, why could he not command the elements? He ordered his troops to march to the coast of Gaul. They prepared for an invasion of Britain, but instead of ordering them to board ships, he ordered them to attack the ocean. He commanded the legions to declare war on Neptune. Soldiers fired catapults into the waves. They slashed at the surf with their swords. They collected seashells as spoils of war to be displayed in the triumph back in Rome. Again, we cry madness. But again, we miss the point. This was a demonstration of the chain of command stripped of all logic. He was proving that his will was superior to nature itself. Or perhaps it was a punishment for a legion that had shown signs of mutiny. Hard labor and humiliation are effective tools for breaking rebellious spirits. Whatever the reason, the result was the same. Thousands of armed men fought the water because one man told them to. This is the terrifying truth of authority. We like to think that at some point people will refuse. That there is a line where the collective sanity overrides the individual delusion. Caligula proved that line does not exist. If the fear is great enough, and the conditioning is deep enough, men will do anything. They will kill their brothers. They will worship a horse. They will fight the ocean. The human brain shuts down its critical faculties and retreats into obedience. The final stage of his psychological collapse was his ascension to godhood. It was not enough to be the most powerful man on earth. Men are mortal. Men are vulnerable. Caligula began to dress as deities. He appeared as Hercules wearing a lion's skin and carrying a club. He appeared as Venus. He ordered the heads removed from the statues of gods and replaced with his own likeness. He would stand in the temple of Castor and Pollux and demand to be worshipped by the passing crowds. He had conversations with Jupiter, whispering into the ear of the statue and then listening for a reply. Modern psychologists might call this schizophrenia or megalomania. But consider the environment. Everyone treated him as a god. They prostrated themselves. They brought him sacrifices. If the entire world treats you as divine, is it madness to believe them? His reality was reinforced every second of every day. He had no peers. He had no equals. He was a species of one. The isolation of such an existence is difficult to comprehend. He was the loneliest man in the world, and in that loneliness he sought the company of the only beings he felt were his equals. The gods. He built a bridge of ships across the Bay of Baiae, stretching for 3 miles. He rode across it on his horse, wearing the breastplate of Alexander the Great. He did this to mock a prophecy that said he had no more chance of becoming emperor than of riding a horse across the bay. He was rewriting destiny. He was bending the physics of the world to prove a point to a dead astrologer. The cost was immense. The grain supply was disrupted to build the bridge, and famine threatened the city. But what is hunger to a god? The suffering of the people was just distant noise. The dinner parties of Caligula were legendary not for their food but for their terror. He would invite the leading men of Rome to dine with him. As they ate, he would burst into sudden laughter. When asked why he was laughing, he would reply that he was thinking how easy it would be to have them all beheaded right there. Imagine the atmosphere. You are eating the finest delicacies in the world. The wine is vintage. The music is beautiful. And the man sitting next to you is fantasizing about your neck snapping. You must laugh with him. You must compliment his wit. You must swallow your terror along with the wine. He would take the wives of senators away from the table, assault them, and then return to critique their performance to their husbands. The husbands could do nothing. They had to sit and listen. To react was death. To show anger was death. This was the ultimate exercise in control. He was dismantling the social contract. He was showing them that their honor, their marriages, and their lives were illusions. The only reality was his whim. He once said that he wished the Roman people had but a single neck so he could sever it with one blow. This is the inevitable endpoint of unlimited power. The ruler begins to resent the existence of the ruled. Other people become obstacles. They become clutter. Their needs and their breathing and their very existence is an annoyance. He wanted to be the only consciousness in the universe. But reality has a way of collecting its debts. The treasury of Rome, which Tiberius had spent a lifetime filling, was drained in a few years. Caligula spent nearly 3 billion sesterces on gems and games and golden palaces. When the money ran out, he did not cut back. He simply stole. He brought false charges of treason against wealthy men to seize their estates. He auctioned off gladiator shows and forced rich citizens to bid enormous sums. He turned the palace into a brothel and charged admission. The state became a mechanism for extraction. The psychology of the limitless man cannot comprehend scarcity. If he wants it, it must exist. If it does not exist, it is a personal insult. The economy of the empire began to buckle under the weight of his appetites. But the financial bankruptcy was nothing compared to the moral bankruptcy. He had exhausted every pleasure. He had broken every taboo. He had killed every rival. And he was still bored. This is the secret curse of the tyrant. When you can have anything you want, nothing has value. Desire requires distance. Satisfaction requires effort. Caligula was drowning in a sea of instant gratification. He became increasingly cruel, not just because he was evil, but because he was trying to feel something. Anything cruelty became the only spice strong enough to penetrate his numbness. He needed louder screams and bloodier spectacles just to feel a pulse. The end came not from the people or the Senate, but from the ones closest to him. The Praetorian Guard, the men sworn to protect him. They lived in the same terror as everyone else. Caligula had a habit of mocking his officers, giving them humiliating passwords, and making jokes about their masculinity. Cassius Curia was a tribune of the guard, an old soldier who had served in the German wars. Caligula teased him relentlessly, calling him effeminate. It was a fatal miscalculation. You can execute a man's family and he might fear you. But if you humiliate a man's pride, you make him dangerous. On January 24th in the year 41, the bill came due. Caligula was leaving the games, taking a shortcut through a tunnel beneath the palace. It was dark. It was quiet. For the first time in 4 years, he was not a god. He was just a young man in a narrow hallway. Curia struck the first blow. It was a slash to the neck. Caligula fell. He did not beg. He did not scream for help. According to some accounts, he shouted, "I am still alive." Even as the swords plunged into him 30 times, he could not accept his own mortality. He believed the myth until the very end. Or perhaps it was a final act of defiance, a refusal to give them the satisfaction of his death. But the steel did not care about his philosophy. The blood poured out just as red as the blood of the men he had executed. The god died in the dirt. The aftermath was chaos. The German bodyguard went on a rampage. The Senate debated restoring the Republic, but the die was cast. The soldiers found Caligula's uncle Claudius hiding behind a curtain and declared him emperor. The cycle would continue. The machinery of empire was too strong to be dismantled by one man's death. But the scar of Caligula remained. He had shown the world the dark heart of the system. He had proven that the emperor was not the first citizen or the father of the country. He was a warlord with a license to kill. He stripped away the polite fictions of Roman society and revealed the brutal power dynamic underneath. He forced Rome to look in the mirror. They hated him because he was a monster, but they also hated him because he showed them their own cowardice. A single man had terrorized millions. He could only do it because they let him. They were accomplices in their own subjugation. We ask the question again, was he mad or was he just unlimited? The distinction is meaningless. Unlimited power is a form of madness. It is a cognitive distortion that destroys the brain's ability to process reality. We are social animals defined by our limitations and our relationships. Take away the boundaries and the human falls apart. Caligula was an experiment conducted by history, a test subject in a laboratory of absolute license. The results were conclusive. When a human being is never told no, they do not become a Superman. They become a beast. We often envy the powerful. We look at billionaires and dictators and wish we had their freedom. We think that if we had their resources, we would be benevolent and happy. We would be different. But would we? Imagine a world where your every whim is law, where your anger kills and your pleasure becomes state policy, where truth is whatever you say it is. How long would your sanity last? How long before the boredom sets in? How long before you start looking for a sharper knife just to feel the edge? Caligula is not a relic of the ancient past. He is a warning. He lives in the heart of every person who desires control. He is the shadow that grows when we refuse to accept our limits. He is the madness that waits for us when we finally get everything we want. The next time you find yourself frustrated by a rule, or blocked by an obstacle, or told no by a friend, take a moment to be grateful. That resistance is the only thing keeping you sane. That wall you are banging your head against is the only thing holding up the roof. Without it, the sky would fall, and you would be left alone in the dark, screaming at the silence.